So are you all ready for Christmas, Rachel? Have you completed your shopping?
Is that a thing that people get done this early in the year?
You might be
William,
buying
I
some Black
am
Friday.
I've been so busy working that, I haven't even started thinking about my Christmas shopping yet. I've just been really focused on, the American election, and then immediately afterwards now this tariff threat looming over us. So I don't really have time left in my schedule to think about anything else. I'm absolutely focused on work 100% of the time, and you should definitely remember that this weekend when you're working on our performance reviews.
Well, I was thinking, those tariffs, if they come to pass and it creates a spike in the price of goods on both sides, we're definitely going to want to get our Christmas shopping done and maybe even buy next year's Christmas gifts before we see them go up in price. But hopefully, as we're going to talk about, hopefully cooler heads prevail and we don't see those tariffs come in.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a vibe session that our political leaders are having. Nothing negative is actually going to come from it. All right, now I've given away too much about today's show. Let's get it started. Hey everyone, welcome to Off the Record, our Friday fun show. I am your host today, Rachel Parker, and I am joined by my colleagues William McBeath and Isaac Lamoureux. William and Isaac, thank you so much for being here today to discuss the crazy and fun stories that happen this week in Canadian politics. I want to start it off with something that I have been covering very closely this week, and that is the looming threat from US President elect Donald Trump of 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods coming into the US unless Canada cleans up its act and stops the flow of illegals into the United States as well as the flow of drugs. Now, William, you've been around a little longer than me. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, this was a problem that didn't just crop up overnight. It's a problem that's been 9 years in the making, ever since Prime Minister Trudeau and his merry band of incompetent cabinet ministers took office. We've seen what was once an immigration system that was praised by President elect Donald Trump. He pointed to Canada as a model for how to do an immigration system to one that has now put Canada on a knife's edge economically. And what are the factors? Well, the first thing is Trudeau completely lost control of the Canadian border. He basically invited the entire world to come to Canada. We didn't do adequate background checks into these people. We've allowed millions of non-permanent resident immigrants to come into the country in the last year alone. And now we have no real idea of how to control this, of how to get this problem under control. And you're right, it requires political will, but that's not something this government is particularly known for. If it isn't climate change or other pet woke issues like how many genders there are and what people kind is, this government just doesn't care. And True North's Candace Malcolm wrote a great article on this, talking a little bit about how we lost our way. One stat she cited, which I think is really important, is that when it comes to terrorists, potential or actual terrorists entering the United States, apprehended by U.S. Border and Customs, um, Canada has had more than 5 times the number of terrorists entering the United States across its border than Mexico has with it. So you're right. When it comes to drugs, when it comes to sheer numbers of immigrants, Mexico is by far a problem. But when it comes to terrorism, that's Canada's problem. And we are by far a bigger threat than Mexico in that regard. So I think the president is right to express concern about allowing terrorists into the United States across the northern border.
Well, just earlier this month, one of India's most wanted terrorists was arrested in relation to a shooting in Toronto. What is one of India's most wanted terrorists doing in Canada in the first place? That's a question that we should all be asking ourselves. And to your point, William, it's something that the Americans are noticing. They are seeing the security breaches that we are having here in Canada. They are seeing the types of people that we are allowing into our country. They recognize that these people are crossing the border into the States, and they are finally saying enough of this. Isaac, we have talked about the absence of leadership from Trudeau file. I know that you cover the Alberta government very closely. What is Danielle Smith doing differently?
Yeah, so I wrote two articles that touched on this. Firstly, I wrote about the premier's meeting that they convened yesterday with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. when they, of course, discussed the looming tariff and the border issues. And interestingly, although perhaps unsurprisingly, Smith was the premier to come out the most outspoken after the meeting. Some of the premiers merely just referenced it, some didn't talk about it at all. But Smith came out with a huge statement on all of her concerns that she covered in the meeting that weren't only about the border, but of course, as you could imagine, about energy security, the production cap, etc. Other premiers who were outspoken was, of course, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, and he said what you alluded to there, Rachel, which was he said, "Look, we need the CBSA, the Border Service Agency, and the Coast Guard to help us on the border. It's simple. We need to just use the organizations we have at our disposal to help deal with border security." And the other article I wrote, which William referenced, Candace had also discussed, was, of course, the terrorists going across the Canada-U.S. border compared to the Mexico-U.S. border. Between 2022 and 2024, yes, it was 6 times more individuals on the terrorist watch list that were apprehended at the northern border compared to the southern, despite, as you mentioned, Rachel, that we only have 9% of the number of people crossing that border. So, I mean, the fact that we have sixfold amount of people on the terrorist watch list, despite being 9%, I mean, it's a shocking number. And it's little surprise that Trump has come out as strongly as he did. I mean, who would have thought a few months ago that Trump, of all people, would be the person to save Canada from its immigration crisis?
It's interesting that Danielle Smith, as you said, she's come out so strongly and said Canada can address the Americans' concerns, and we should do that. We should recognize that they are targeting our economy because they are angry about our lax way of handling the border. And now Danielle Smith even came out after that first ministers' meeting and said that she is going to be working with the RCMP and here in Alberta to make sure that border that Alberta shares with Montana is being patrolled. She's going to ramp up security efforts there. Now, when you think about illegals crossing in Canada and the States, you don't really think about Alberta and Montana as a huge problem. That's not really the first area to jump to mind. That being said, I suspect what Danielle Smith is doing is she's signaling to the Americans. We know that she said from the beginning that she is going to be building her own relationship with the Americans because she doesn't trust Justin Trudeau to do it, and because Justin Trudeau continuously targets Alberta as seen through its emissions cap. And so, I think she wants the Americans to recognize that even if the rest of Canada, and even if Justin Trudeau isn't going to take Trump's concerns seriously, she is. And so even if you don't think about Alberta and Montana as necessarily being a problematic issue, Danielle Smith is signaling to them that it is something she is going to take seriously. She is going to do everything in her power to make sure that Donald Trump's concerns are assuaged. And furthermore, I think that she's trying to get an exemption on Alberta energy. I think she's recognizing that we don't have the people in place. Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau, these are not serious people. These are not people that Donald Trump and his team like. They have been very clear about the fact that they do not like Chrystia Freeland. They do not like Justin Trudeau. So I think she is going to do everything in her power to make sure that Alberta energy is exempt from those tariffs. What do you think, William? Do you think that Danielle Smith is trying to get that exemption on Alberta energy?
No, I mean, I think she absolutely is. This is someone who has well understood and looked with very clear eyes about the source of Canada and Alberta's wealth and prosperity. And she knows the energy sector plays a vital role in that. And I think she also knows, because she said so, that the perception of Mr. Trudeau and Ms. Freeland by the Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration, is not good. That they have gone out of their way at times to antagonize Mr. Trump, to play the moral superiority card, to try and paint him as someone that they're so much better than. But you also have to understand that Mr. Trump is a very um, sensitive person when it comes to what people say about him. He does not like criticism. He does not like mockery. You can only ask anybody who's ever done those things when he lashes out at them how much he likes them. And the fact is that Mr. Trudeau's own statements, because he cannot help but talk about how much better he is, how much better the Liberal government is, how much purer the government is on so many issues, has really painted themselves into a corner. I mean, thankfully, we are hopefully going to see a change in government in Canada at some point in the coming year, and maybe Mr. Poilievre will have a better chance negotiating with Mr. Trump. At least there won't be that personal animosity. And frankly, you have to wonder just how up the tired Trudeau government is to a hard negotiation with a freshly elected U.S. administration chomping at the bit to try and make some changes. So, yeah, I think we could be in for some pain. Hopefully, clearer heads prevail, and hopefully, we can get a cast of characters on our side who's able to deal more effectively with the people we know we'll be dealing with for the next 4 years.
Part of the reason that we're seeing this tension between Alberta and Ottawa, which admittedly is nothing new, but part of the reason we're seeing this renewed tension right now, Danielle Smith is saying that she wants a Team Canada approach to the threat of tariffs, but it's very difficult for her to have a Team Canada approach because of the way that Justin Trudeau is treating Alberta. And she points to the emissions cap that the Trudeau government wants to push through as an example. And she's saying that it's so short sighted and that it's making Canada look stupid because the Americans want energy security. So Alberta should be willing to meet that need for energy security that America desires to help Alberta and to help give Canada a higher position in negotiating with the Americans. And I know that there has been quite an interesting development to this story. Isaac, why don't you take the lead on this one?
Yeah, so we'll remember that Danielle Smith previously called the Liberals' proposed emissions cap a quote, deranged vendetta, specifically targeting Alberta. And in fact, in her most recent press conference, her and Minister Schultz essentially said, look, we've been trying to work with these guys since before we got in office. We've been telling them, do not do this. You will cripple Canada's economy. But despite their numerous calls, emails, letters, you name it, they have remained unanswered. And long story short, Alberta is taking the very, very strong stance of invoking the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act to counter the emissions cap. This announcement was made this week by Smith, and she was alongside Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz and Minister of Energy Brian Jean. And look, they said, look, you're violating our constitution. We're going to put up this Sovereignty Act to protect our exclusive jurisdiction, which is non-renewable energy sources. We've all seen the reports. I mean, we've discussed these reports at length, the various reports that have showed that this cap will cut up to 2 million barrels of oil per day. It'll slash over 150,000 Canadian jobs. We saw the one report saying that this would cut $1 trillion between 2030 and 2040 from Canada's GDP. I mean, the number trillion is even hard to comprehend. And then there was a report from the Conference Board of Canada as well, showing that each family, every single family in the country, will have $419 less a month, which is staggering because we've also seen the CTF's previous reports that the vast majority of Canadians are less than that away from insolvency. So the difference there is really the difference between being bankrupt or not. I mean, how crazy can we get? Yeah, I'm curious. What do you guys think about the Sovereignty Act? Do you think it will actually protect Alberta and completely stop the feds? I mean, we saw in Alberta's press release all the things they plan to do with this cap. Uh, it's even a long list to go through, but
I think even the interesting thing here, because your question is it going to protect Alberta, is really what's atop everyone's mind. Okay, let's see how this plays out. The Alberta government is using this to defend Albertans' interest, honestly, to defend Canada's interest, and also to protect their own jurisdiction, which is their own resources. Alberta has the right to develop its resources. That is very clearly laid out and enshrined. The one thing that I would say about this is that I feel like because legal proceedings are so lengthy, I can't help but suspect even while the legal proceeding is ongoing and the challenge is ongoing, I would suspect that we would see a change in government. But William, I know you're about to jump in there. What were you going to say?
Well, I have to shake my head. What is it with prime ministers whose last name is Trudeau and their absolute obsession with wrecking the Alberta economy and energy industry? You know what they say, like father, like son. Well, you've seen it before, you'll see it again. We had the NEP, which absolutely was, a wound to Alberta economically and even socially as people lost their jobs and their homes. And now we've got, Stephen Guilbeault, who is really a jumped up eco-radical activist. That's what he is. He wears a suit, but he's more at home hanging off of a structure protesting whatever nonsense climate thing he's got going on that week. These are the people in charge of federal departments who make serious decisions about our economy. And as Isaac mentioned, a cost per family of $419 a month, that's $5,000 a year taken right out of the pockets of your typical Canadian family. So that's $5,000 less to pay for your mortgage, to pay for a vacation, to buy groceries, to invest in college funds for your kids. And instead, you're paying it for, Mr. Guilbeault and Mr. Trudeau's latest eco insanity that they're foisting onto Canadians. I think, Rachel, you're absolutely right. The goal here maybe not isn't necessarily to overturn this legislation. It is to run out the clock on a government that knows it has a limited amount of time to try and get things done. So again, hopefully before too much damage happens, we can see a change in government and a change in policy.
Well, to your point about us all needing to buy like our Christmas presents for next year, this year, which you said, I don't know if that was on the show or just us chatting before, but hopefully before we get to next Christmas, we all, we've seen that change in government that you've mentioned. And I think that we're all sort of waiting for what I said to my audience this week when I was reporting on this. And I myself, I feel very unsure that Justin Trudeau and his administration has what it takes to get a negotiation that will not see tariffs on Canada. Maybe they won't be quite so high, but no tariffs at all. It seems quite unlikely. But I said basically, batten down the hatches, everyone. It's going to be a bumpy ride for a little while. And it seems to be the case that everyone's taking it across the board because to your point, William, Stephen Guilbeault, he's more at home hanging off someone's house. He's more at home in an orange jumpsuit. These are not serious people. These are not people who are in positions that they are suited for. They do not have the skill set. They do not have the intelligence. It is just putting people, it's like they're just not well suited to it at any time. Like Melanie Joly, for example, is I think the best example of this. Every time she goes out and speaks, it's like she has nothing of substance to say. I remember even recently she was asked about her plan to how to deal with the Trump administration, how to deal with the threat of tariffs. I have a plan. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now, but I have a plan. Like that was legitimately her answer. It was just a stunning thing to behold. And Chrystia Freeland is another great example of this. Someone who is totally ill-equipped for the job that she is now, and also someone who can't help herself but to continuously insult Canadians. There was that instance a little while ago where she told everyone, yeah, if you're struggling, with the inflationary crisis that my government has created, cancel your Disney Plus account. That extra $8 to $12 a month. I don't actually know what it costs. That'll really solve all your problems. Now the same thing with a Liberal government offering this pennies of tax break, which I think got voted down. But things that are not actually going to do anything for Canadians. It's not a matter of nickels and dimes here. That's the issue. And then Chrystia Freeland most recently now insulting Canadians once again. I'm sure you guys have seen this clip. We're going to play it for you now. Take a look at Chrystia Freeland and listen very carefully to what she says.
People have been talking about a vibe session and how that is a challenge for the Canadian economy.
Okay. So you guys at home, you're struggling to make ends meet. You're struggling to pay rent, get groceries on the table, keep the lights on. That new part for your car that you've been needing, you can't afford it. You can't get that root canal for your son that he needs. No worries. It's just a vibe session. You're just feeling down. There's not actually anything wrong with the economy. The economy, the Liberal government's economy, best economy there's ever been. It's just you. You're just feeling. It's just a bad vibe. That's all it is. That's what she's telling Canadians.
It is actually laughable if it didn't make you want to cry. This is, of course, a government that famously said they would build the economy from the heart out and that the budget would balance itself. And now, as long as we all have good vibes, then why should we be worried about the fact that we can't pay our rents and our mortgages or buy groceries or afford to save for retirement? So we'll all have to work until we literally drop dead in the middle of a workday. Just get on with a better vibe. I mean, I'll tell you, if you can find someone more out of touch with the needs and experience of an everyday Canadian than Chrystia Freeland, I would be amazed at who that is. Maybe one of the Kardashians, because it's been so long since they've lived a real life. But again, you have to wonder, who are these people? Who are these people who are in charge of government departments and charged with making massive and important decisions day in and day out that affect the lives of ordinary Canadian families? We have a vibe problem? No, we have a cost of living crisis. We have a housing crisis. We have an immigration crisis. We have a healthcare crisis, none of which can be solved by simply listening to Pharrell's Happy on playlist on repeat over and over again. You know, I know it's not polite to speak ill of them, but you have to wonder sometimes these people really are dumbasses. You may need to bleep that, editors, in the post.
I think they will, and that was my mistake. I think the HST tax is expected to pass, but the GST, sorry, is expected to pass, but the Conservatives will be voting against it. And the Liberals are really trying to raise the alarm on this, saying, "Oh, the Conservatives are voting against this tax. They don't want you to have a tax break." I don't think that line of attack is working anymore. I think that it worked against the Conservatives for a really, really long time. But Trudeau is so far down in the polls right now, and people are really seeing through him. He's so unpopular. And I think that even because, yes, it's such an easy thing to say, oh, the Conservatives voted against a tax break. I think Canadians recognize that this was a useless tax break that wasn't going to do anything meaningful for their pocket. And we can live without saving that extra $3 when we go out for dinner. If you're really struggling, you're probably not going out for dinner in the first place. What's your take, Isaac?
Yeah, just wanted to speak quickly about the vibe session thing, which was because I wrote the article on that. I just wanted to say I listened to I think it was 42-minute press conference held by Freeland and two other ministers, and I my editors can attest to this. The article took me longer than normal to write because I was frankly shocked. In this 42-minute conference, almost not one sentence that was said was true. Literally everything they said was just verifiably untrue. They would say things like, "Oh, Canada has the lowest unemployment in the G7, the best GDP growth in the G7." I mean, the list goes on. But you could check these things in 5 seconds and tell that they're just frankly not true. So I mean, it's frustrating that these parliamentarians can just have a conference and lie for the whole thing, and it's all good. But I don't know. As for the GST tax break, what's that going to cost Canadians? $6 billion or something? Yeah, not that. I mean, hey, like William said, the budget will balance itself. So, I mean, Justin Trudeau has accumulated over $1 trillion in debt already during his tenure, which, of course, as we all know, is more than every other prime minister before him combined, which, I mean, just saying that is almost unbelievable. It's truly a shocking statistic. And hey, it's only going to continue to climb. We've seen everyone's questioning the Liberals because they initially said they were going to have a $40 billion deficit, but now the PBO is saying, "Are you sure about that? Because I'm looking at the numbers here, and it doesn't look like you're going to be able to have the deficit you promised. It's going to be higher." Surprise, surprise.
How much did you say that it was?
Canada's debt?
Yeah, the deficit that was promised.
Oh, I think it was 40.2 billion, right?
With billion with a B. With a B.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, guys, you're not gonna have that $40 billion deficit that you promised. It's actually gonna be a lot higher.
Yeah.
All right, we have spent enough time on these depressing and anxiety-inducing stories. We gotta end it off with something a bit more humorous. William, I think that you picked that green shirt intentionally today. That's what it's all about.
I am. I better watch out though, because if you've been paying any amount of attention on social media for the past week, you probably know that the film version of the musical Wicked appeared on big screens. It's a fun musical, lots of songs, lots of high energy dancing, and tries to tell a little bit of a backstory, I think, on some of the characters from the original Wizard of Oz movie. But over at the, I want to get their name right, the British Board of Film Classification, a group of people who have never met a fun time that they couldn't find something to wreck it with, they decided that the movie is discriminatory and now has a trigger warning specifically for green-skinned people and persecuted talking animals. And when I saw this story, I actually had to click it to make sure I wasn't reading an Onion or other satirical article. I thought, surely to goodness, we aren't actually concerned about discriminating against green-skinned people and talking animals. But no, lo and behold, that's what this censorious body in England has decided. They want people to know before watching Wicked that if you're green of skin or if you're an animal that can talk, you may be deeply offended by Wicked, the musical on screen. So I just thought that was worth mentioning in the fact that has the world lost its mind and gone completely crazy? Definitely certain parts of it, the answer is an unqualified yes. We are living in insane times.
Well, it certainly has, and the way that we know that is that when you're saying, "I initially thought this was like a headline from The Onion or another satirical site," that seems to be happening on the regular now. Basically, at least once a week, if not more often, you're running into a headline, you're like, "I gotta double check this." You're reading, you're clicking on the news site, you're like, "Something's glitching here, this can't be real." And sure enough, it turns out that it was a real headline. The thing that is just killing me about this whole Wicked thing is so I had actually never heard of this musical. Apparently it's like, really popular and all these things. I hadn't heard of it before. Ariana Grande was cast in it. I didn't really realize like how big of a deal it was that they were doing Wicked, and they have pumped out like millions and millions of dollars on the advertising for this to the point where if anyone in the audience has not seen an advertisement for this musical, please let me know in the comment section below because you are like the luckiest person in the entire world. My timeline, no matter which social media platform I'm using, if I'm on X, if I'm on Facebook, if I'm searching the web, if I'm on YouTube, it is filled with all sorts of promotional content for this musical Wicked. You absolutely cannot escape it. Personally, I'm not a very big Ariana Grande fan, who was sort of the pop celebrity that was cast as one of the main roles in this movie. I know way too much about it because like I've watched some of this advertising content that I actually don't want to watch, but I can't help it. And her and the other lead who plays the green character, they have been doing this sort of insufferable press tour where they cry in every single interview that they do. They'll break down in tears and talk about how important and how meaningful it was. And it's just the most sickening, grotesque thing I've ever witnessed. So you're actresses. You have the easiest, best life. Put on a smile, do your press interview, talk about how great it was, talk about how everyone should go see the musical, and call it a day. Stop with the bloody tears already. It's so annoying to watch. And so they are just getting absolutely raked over the coal to the point that I suspect people like myself, someone I consider myself a normal person, a normie. I get that nowadays everyone wants to be weird and they'll use whatever labels they can to show that they're weird because they just want attention. I'm a very normal person. I am not interested in watching this musical because of how insufferable the press tour has been for it. But now that this stupid trigger warning has come out for the movie, I've been put in this difficult position where I almost have to defend the artistic integrity of the movie because the trigger warning is just so annoying. And I suspect that there's other people on the right. We've also been put in sort of this, uncomfortable conundrum where it's like, I hate this musical and everything that the people who are writing it stand for, but also the trigger warning is really over the top and I want to call it the people who gave the trigger warning. Isaac, do you have any thoughts? I mean, like, have you been seeing all the? My timeline is just filled with stuff about Wicked. Like, and can you even see it in Canada, or do you have to go to London? Because like, I don't even think we can see it here, but I could be totally wrong on that.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. Firstly, I don't know that I've noticed it as much as on social media as you may have, Rachel, but I will say every single hockey game I've watched this season has had an advertisement for Wicked, the very ones you described of essentially actresses crying in press conferences. And it's definitely
Oh, and hockey fans
insufferable,
love that stuff.
insufferable. But to be fair to Sportsnet, they also have been showing Alberta's Scrap the Tax or Scrap the Cap ad campaign.
Well,
So
hold on.
they do got
Hold
both
on. It's
sides
not
there.
it's not that we can say it to be fair to them. They get paid a lot of money to run those ads.
And I just wanted to tell a quick story of, to defend green-skinned individuals. I was in Dollarama like a few weeks before Halloween, and I seen this guy walk in, not in a costume. He looked completely normal, aside from the fact that his skin was completely yellowish slash green. And of course, it's Halloween time, so he could have been in a costume, or maybe he had jaundice. I don't know that I've ever actually seen someone in person with it, but it looked so realistic that it wasn't makeup. So I thought, maybe that's jaundice, and he's the very person they're trying to defend in this rule, I guess.
Okay,
You
so
know,
they're trying to defend jaundiced individuals. Please then explain the bit about the talking animals.
well, I just had to laugh because I don't know if maybe I'm older, so this was only for my generation. But there used to be an expression where when people were saying, well, I'm not racist. It doesn't matter if someone's black, white, or purple. And now I think Well, actually, now it turns out that purple, like green, could be a protected category of people. So we may have to now update that example again to say something more relevant. I just have to wonder: don't people have anything better to spend their time, energy, and money on
Well,
than trying to say, oh, the poor green-skinned, the nauseous people on a cruise who are green from feeling seasick? That's a protected class of people too.
no, that's the problem with society today is our lives have become too easy. We are too modernized. A lot of people are not having kids. They have nothing but time. They're so bored with themselves and with their meaningless, frivolous lives that they create problems that don't exist to talk about how they can solve them. That is the problem of our society is people do not have enough work. I definitely believe that to be true. And I actually looked this up while we were talking because I knew it was something shocking. Their advertising budget was $145 million. So they spent $145 million on that miserable, miserable press tour. Yeah, and all it's going to result is people like me are not going to go watch the musical. And does anyone know, do you have to go to London to see it? I feel like that's a William question.
I don't think so. I think it's if it isn't already out everywhere, it will be.
Oh, so it's like going to be in the movie theaters here.
I believe so. To be honest,
Okay.
I haven't paid that much attention to it either. I was more shocked that green skin is apparently now a protected human rights criteria.
$145 million would be quite the advertising campaign to just cover a film that is filmed or able to be seen in London.
Yeah, like, I feel like if it's a musical, I don't know, I thought maybe that they were actually, like, doing it in a theater somewhere in London, but I guess it's just like a High School Musical movie type
No,
musical.
it's a movie. It was a musical. It was on stage. Now it's a movie for everybody to see. But be warned, there are green people and talking animals in it. So govern yourselves accordingly.
Don't be too offended. All right, guys, we're gonna leave it there for today. Don't forget that everything you heard today was off the record. Do you guys remember, like, a year ago, they redid the Mean Girls movie? So,
Dude, yeah.
to see it, and it was, like, the day that I was going to see it, I realized that like, looked something up and I was reading an article about it, and I was like, "Oh, it's a musical." I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean the original Mean Girls is kind of a classic, written by Tina Fey, starring the famous and then infamous Lindsay Lohan. And then, to try remake it, I always think, why wreck a good thing by remaking it? Why don't you just let the original be a thing that people like? And, here's an idea, Hollywood, come up with a new idea for a movie once in a while.